Welcome everyone to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy. I am an alcoholic.
And my name's Mick, and I also am an alcoholic. And we're serving as your secretary today. Please join me in a few moments' silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting.
And Jane is going to read the preamble for us.
Hi, my name is Jane and I am an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve the common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you for letting me do service, Mossy and Mick.
Thank you, Jane. And a warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the chat is now disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host. If you feel the meeting security is at risk at any time during the meeting, please let one of the co-hosts know so they can check it out.
Suggest that you are mindful about your sharing private information in the open chat pre and post meeting, and perhaps also consider sharing only your email address in the first instance instead of a phone number.
And that's it, guys, until we open it up for sharing. Our speaker this evening is HARISH from Gibraltar. He's 37 years sober, and he's a regular in our meeting, the Canarian International Group. But his home group is the Sundowners. Am I right there, HARISH?
Sundowners in Gibraltar, yeah.
Well done, HARISH. Good to have you with us. And you have 45 minutes. And take it away. Nobody will stop you if you go on any longer either, dude. It's all good.
My name is HARISH. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Grateful to be an alcoholic, and just quite excited about being here. Please bear with me because I'm quite nervous. And there's quite a few of you who know my story. Anna J could probably tell my story verbatim. So if I wasn't here, she could probably take over. And there's also a lovely friend of mine, Lynn, who's I've known since 1995 in the fellowship. And there's something very pertinent that Anna said, like I looked smart, or I don't know what the words she used. But one of the reasons why I wore this outfit is that I hated being Indian, and today I love being Indian. In fact, I hated being HARISH, and now I love being HARISH. It's the biggest gift this program has given to me, because my greatest enemy was always myself. Anyway, as I said, my name is HARISH. I am a grateful alcoholic, grateful to be an alcoholic. As you can tell from my tan, I am Indian. I am the youngest of 9 brothers and 6 sisters. My father was not an alcoholic, but with a number of kids that he had, you probably imagine that he might have some other obsessive compulsive behavior which had nothing to do with alcohol. I'd leave it to you to decide what his obsessions could be. I'm going to tell a bit of my early childhood. My early childhood, the way I could describe myself as a child was I was a boy full of fear, full of anxiety, and never felt that I measured up. I had 3 mother figures, and all 3 abandoned me either through death or just circumstances. I was not emotionally abused, but I was emotionally neglected. And that's why I had that sort of feeling of never measuring up or fitting in. I hold absolutely no resentment to my parents because they were very uneducated people. And I know that today, people that can only act with the knowledge and awareness that they have at that time in their lives. If they knew better, they would have done better. And so would I. So I was brought up in a Hindu home. educated in a Jewish school, and I went with the Christian Brothers, which weren't very Christian. By the time I was 11, I was quite psychologically damaged as a kid. And I was seeing a child psychologist at the age of 11 because I used to be physically sick before going to school. I used to throw up just of the fear overwhelmed me. During the period at the Jewish school, I was also sexually abused, and I never told anybody about this. So, my psychological makeup was sort of like, was a recipe for disaster. I have absolutely no self-esteem, and I was always felt like the ugly duckling. As a youngster, my parents always used to entertain at home, and I was what I think was the cute little child who would pick up the drinks, the leftovers, the dregs, and finish them off, and everybody would think, oh, what a cute little boy. But my father's best friend used to nickname me Nashe. Nashe in Indian, I believe, means drunk. And I hadn't started drinking yet, but he obviously must have been a clairvoyant or something, because he obviously knew what was to come. So that was sort of a bit of my background as a child. And I did manage to pass my 11 plus, and I went to the grammar school. And but I didn't do very well at school. I was totally preoccupied, and for most of my life, I felt like an emotional mess, and I thought that was the order of things. I thought that being screwed up was the order of things until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't realize there was another way to live. So I had my first real drink at the age of 13, 14. And, I remember I liked many things as a youngster, but when that first drink hit the pit of my stomach, for the first time in my life, I felt like I thought normal people felt. Those fears greatly diminished, and that sense of inadequacy also disappeared. Now, I don't relate to people in Alcoholics Anonymous who say they went from social drinking to alcoholic drinking. I drank excessively and obsessively from the word go. Every chance I got to drink, I got drunk. Not because I wanted to get drunk. I didn't understand the concept that I do now about the first drink, because there were times that I did want to drink like a gentleman, but that day never happened. In the big book, it says, the great obsession of every abnormal drinker that someday, somehow, he'll be able to control and enjoy his drinking. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. And I tried every conceivable way to stop drinking, and I just couldn't. My problem wasn't that I couldn't stop. My problem was that I couldn't stop starting drinking, if that makes any sense. See, because I didn't understand at the time that I have a mind that only remembers what alcohol does for me, not to me. What makes me an alcoholic at a very simplistic level is this. Once I ingest any alcohol into my system, I can't consistently predict how much I'm going to drink. And the other thing I can't do is consistently predict how I'm going to behave. If I could do that, I wouldn't be in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd be partings there. But I'm so glad for the pain that alcohol administered in my life, because I hope it's sent me to a place of spiritual maturity where I can be grateful for pain. That doesn't mean I enjoy pain, but I'm grateful for it once I come out the other side, because it's made me who I am today. As I said, in my earlier years, there were no major consequences. My friends used to get drunk. I used to take them home. I used to get drunk. They used to take me home, and so it went. I was not very successful with the ladies because I was petrified of rejection, and I always saw myself as totally inadequate, really ugly, and not academically very qualified. So I would peacock around the ladies, but I never had the courage to ask them. And the few ladies that I did go out with were basically, they went out with me. During the first few years of my drinking, like I said, no major consequences. I got my driving license. I actually bought my driving license in those days. It was £80 that I bribed the guy. And in the first 3 months the first 6 months of driving, I had 3 car accidents. But part of my illness was that I couldn't connect my drinking to the consequences. I just thought I had bad luck. And I always had that thing, it'll be different next time. See, there would be often times where, as my illness progressed, my moral compass went out of the window. And what once was unacceptable started becoming acceptable. You know, I had certain values as a child, but as my illness progressed, you know, my values just went out of the window. And I became a true Jekyll and Hyde. I think it was maybe 1920, I was in a pub and I met the lady who would later become my wife. And I don't mean this with any disrespect, but I was so starved for affection that any woman who would have shown me any affection whatsoever, I would have hung on like a bloody leech because I was in a position of need, not a position of power. So, you know, I hung on like a bloody leech to this lady. And what started as a great romance ended up in a worse nightmare that any human being should go through. Because I was abusive in every single sense of the word. Not because I was bad. You know, I've come to realize in Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm not a bad person trying to be good. I'm a sick person trying to get well. And I didn't know that at the time. You know, and I don't think that's, you know, an excuse, but, you know, because I thought, you know, this illness thing and disease business was an excuse too. But I know that I'm not morally responsible for having an illness, but I am morally responsible for the subsequent behavior. And that's why we have the steps. So what happened was, I'm not going to go into every single war story that I have, but there was always two things in my mind's eye that I always remember, you know, and one is, you know, in one of my blackouts, I had my 4-year-old daughter hanging out of a 4-story balcony. You know, when I pick up a drink, it's like playing Russian roulette. You don't know what's going to happen. You know, as I understand alcoholism today, alcoholism will take you to places where you don't want to go. It will take you to places you don't want to go. When I first came in, when I was very young, 27, I used to say, I haven't done this or that or the other. And the old times would tell me, not yet. But I knew that I was capable of anything. And, you know, I was always full of remorse and full of shame. And I had my own private national anthem. And my private national anthem would be, I promise I'll never do that again. And there would times where I would have tears rolling down my eyes, telling my wife that I wouldn't behave as badly next time. And 3 days later, I was at it again. I would meet my friend Mick or Mozzie and, you know, say, just have a half pint this time. You know, this time I'll control it. And it started ball rolling again. And that's what I understand to be, you know, the merry-go-round of alcoholism. You know, but the thing was, I mean, today I understand that there's the physical part of alcoholism, you know, the physical allergy and the mental obsession. The mental obsession being that despite the negative consequences, my head would always tell me next time it will be different. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was always restless, irritable, and discontented. And if that was left untreated, sooner or later, I would pick up a drink again. So, you know, trying to use willpower in alcoholism is trying to use willpower and diarrhea. You're going to shit yourself. And that's the bottom line. And what happened then was, other than this incident with my daughter, 9 months before I stopped drinking, my wife had tried to commit suicide because living with me had become unbearable. You know, Bill W. writes that anybody who lives with an alcoholic is mentally, physically, spiritually sick too. It's impossible to live with an alcoholic and not be gravely affected. You know, I had everybody like an emotional yo-yo. And out in the pub, I was Jack the lad, and I was quite gregarious. But at home, I would be, you know, a bloody terror. But my behavior started becoming more and more unacceptable. So much so that I did have what I called so-called normal friends. But because I was so unpredictable, even my friends ostracized me and pushed me to one side. And then my family, you know, eventually left me because, you know, I just didn't know how to behave. And like I said earlier, it's not because I was a bad person. I just didn't realize how sick I was. Anyway, in I think it was early, I'm not sure about the date, but more or less January 1986, my wife tried to commit suicide. And I told her, please don't tell the psychiatrist what happens when I drink. And, you know, when he actually interviewed us, I said, when he asked me what the problem was, I thought, well, we didn't have enough sex. You know, I was 27 years old at the time. And I told her, please don't tell him what happens when I drink. I won't drink no more whiskey, because I thought that was a problem. So I drank, I can't remember, it was gin or beer or whatever. But this is not beerism or ginger, you know, it's alcoholism, you know, and regardless and what shape or form I take alcohol, the result is always the same. I would always end up intoxicated. So during this session, what the psychiatrist had suggested was that my wife take a break and go back home to London and have a break for me for a month and then try to reconcile after a month. During this period, I would go home with my, you know, because I'm not a common drunk, I'm a high class drunk, and I would take my bottle of Black Label every evening after work and put the sad songs, you know. I don't know if any of you were old enough to remember the Commodores, and there's a song called Still. And I would rewind, in those days it was cassettes, and I would rewind the song, you know, make the pain deeper and have another scotch, and then replay the song and have another scotch till I passed out. You know, my illness is such that I couldn't see past my nose. You know, during this month, I was full of self-pity and I couldn't see the amount of pain I had inflicted on others. It was always about me. You know, I just couldn't see past my nose. So on, you know, after a month of this, my wife came back, and the first night that she came back, as the psychiatrist had suggested, we were supposed to have a romantic night out, and we all got dressed up. We went out with another couple, and you know, went to a restaurant, had some wine, and I can't remember what, went to a discotheque. And the last thing I remember was passing out in a discotheque, and I'm told that I hit the barman in the discotheque, and I was dragged in by the back of the car. And this was supposed to be the first night back of reconciliation under the psychiatrist's orders. Gibraltar is a very small town, and my wife, I'm told, just screamed, jumped out of the car screaming, I'm not going back with that effing animal. I'm not going back with that effing animal. Because that is what I had become. You know, I had become totally, totally unacceptable. You know, things were really, really bad. And, you know, just to put the last nail in the coffin, one night I went out to the boys. I had never been unfaithful to my wife, but that night we went to a brothel, and I was unfaithful. And the next morning, I couldn't remember anything. But apparently I told my wife exactly what I did with this prostitute. And that was the last nail in the coffin. During the summer of 1986, I found out that my wife was having an affair with my then sort of one of my best mates. And there was well, I won't go into detail, but basically there was a scuffle at home with knives, and, you know, it got quite nasty, and I broke into somebody else's house. And the next morning, the police came over and came to my house for the protection of my child, because they said I was a very violent drunk. And they came for the protection. And I was so embarrassed, because my family were not the sort of family that got involved with the police. So it was like my secret was out. And I felt so ashamed when the police, there was a sergeant and two cops who came to my house to take my children away. And you know, I was totally defeated, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. So there was a friend of mine who arrived from London, and he says, Harish, you need some help. And I wanted to go and see a psychiatrist or psychologist, because I didn't want anybody in Gibraltar to know that I was nuts. Everybody probably knew except me. You know, so I went to London, and I went to see this guy called Dr. Tideman. And in our first meeting, you know, I had what I call my first emotional vomit, because I was riddled with guilt and shame. I thought I wasn't going to tell this guy anything. You know, I felt like I had a big potato down in my throat. But once I started opening up, you know, I just opened up totally, and you know, released the emotional energy that I had stored in there. On the second meeting that I had with him, he says, I don't know why he asked me this stupid question, but he says, Mr. Viral, do you drink a lot? And I said, I chose my words very, I mean, now looking back, I told him I drink a lot because my wife has left me. My wife has left me because I drink a lot. And I saw him for a few sessions. And at the end, what I understand and what I recall was, you know, he said, either you choose your drinking or your marriage. Although my wife had been unfaithful, I still was hoping for reconciliation. And he prescribed some antidotes. And I went to see my local GP. And you know, when I went to see my GP back in Gibraltar, I was no longer in denial. You know, I told him what really happened when I drank. And he suggested that I go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I felt greatly offended because I had preconceived ideas of what an alcoholic was. You know, I was the manager of a business. I was secretary of a sporting association. And I thought, how could I possibly be an alcoholic? But, you know, I was in so much emotional pain that I conceded to meeting one of you guys on a one-to-one, but I wouldn't go to a meeting. So this guy, I told this guy to meet me down at the Angry Friar, which is a pub in Gibraltar, and, you know, we'd have a pint and talk about this. Because I really didn't know what to expect. And when he met me, it wasn't very difficult to identify me because I told him I was Indian. And he said, look, we're not going to go in here. We're going to go out across the rooms, which is what we had our meetings in King's Chapel. I think that's where I met Lynn, and in 1995. And you know, this guy took, you know, this guy was not a professional. He was not a psychologist. He was not a psychiatrist. And he was, at the time, I was basically illiterate or practically illiterate. And this guy was not much better than me. But he started telling me his story. And I thought, this little bug has been speaking to my wife because everything he's done, I've done. And if he says he's an alcoholic, I must be one too. And he told me, Harish, you know, if you come to meetings, ask for help and don't pick one drink one day at a time, you'll be all right. That was hopefully the 14th of September, 1986, you know, and that also happened to be my daughter's birthday. And, you know, God willing, that was my last drink. You know, I'm so glad that I was thick enough to understand the simplicity of the program, in as much as, you know, if you don't pick up the first drink, you don't get drunk. Come to meetings and ask for help. And I've been doing that for almost 38 years. You know, there are many of you nowadays who have the great fortune of being taken by, you know, by the big book, and you've got great sponsors. You know, when I got sober, it was in the Stone Age in Gibraltar. There was only one big book between 7 of us, and you know, it was like the blind leading the blind. So, you know, there are people who come through the direct route, and I came through the scenic route, if that makes any sense. You know, I had to do everything piecemeal myself. And oftentimes the old timers would tell me, Harish, now that you're not drinking, are you okay? And I would say yes. And inwardly, I was dying. You know, I would say yes. I would go home, put the covers on my head and cry like a child because I couldn't tell you guys, please help me, I'm hurting. You know, please don't. The only time I contemplated taking my life, or at least it wasn't a proper suicide attempt, but it was a cry for help, was when I got sober, because I just couldn't manage my emotions. I was too overwhelmed by my emotions. And I was still, you know, I was still using fists. So it was through the pain of being sober that I had to look at the steps, you know? So what's happened in these last 37 years, 38 years? They say that God gives his strongest soldiers the biggest battles, you know? And I think he must have thought I am the Indian version of Rambo, because I've had to go through a lot of adversities in my recovery. And I'm not saying I am special or different, but what I'm trying to tell, my message is that no matter what happens, you don't have to pick up a drink. You know, I learned in my early recovery, there's a line in the big book which says, wife or no wife, job or no job, you can get well if you want to. And by this time, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a revulsion against myself. There's a little book, which is not AA approved, it's a Hazelden, which is a 24-hour-a-day book. And the 2nd of January states, until the alcoholic hasn't had a revulsion against himself, very little can be done for him. People had begged me to stop, people had cried, people had threatened me to stop, but, of no avail until I couldn't hit that rock bottom. I had to hit that rock bottom. That's why I say I'm so grateful for the pain I've had in my life. I don't like it whilst I'm going through it, but nevertheless, So what's happened in these last 37 years? I said I'm the youngest of 9 brothers, and 7 of my brothers have passed away. But 4 of them directly as a result of addiction. One of them sort of committed suicide when I was 2 years sober. Another one died of cirrhosis of the liver, and one of them I managed to 12-step one of our brother, and he stayed sober from 1995 till 2010 when he passed away due to lung cancer. And there was another brother who also died as a consequence of alcoholism. I had my mother with both legs amputated before her death. My father died 5 days before my sister's wedding. So I've had a lot of losses. And in 1997, I had probably one of the most difficult years in my recovery, where in May 1997, if I remember correctly, I was forced out of the family business and I lost a lot of money. And then on the 15th of October of the same year, my then girlfriend died in the Dominican Republic. A few weeks after that, I was told that I was misdiagnosed with hepatitis C, which was a big thing at the time. And I was also told that my eldest daughter had been sexually abused. This is all in a period of 10 months. And everybody thought that my sobriety would be threatened. But, like I said before, when adversity does strike in my recovery, rather than leaning away from the fellowship, I lean towards the fellowship. And I use my higher power as an anchorage. I don't know if that makes any sense, as a spiritual anchorage, because there are days where the program, my head's up my backside, but the best thing I can do for that day is not pick up a drink. And like I said before, my sobriety is not negotiable so far. I rather put a gun to my head than pick up a drink. And the reason why, it can sound quite dramatic, but I wouldn't be able to take the humiliation and the degradation that alcoholism administered on my life. I couldn't go through that again. So yes, there has been a lot of adversities. There's been financial losses. There's been romantic losses and physical losses, as I've told you. But there was, sometimes, there's some great things which happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I may deviate for a minute and just tell you that in 1997, when my girlfriend died in the Dominican Republic, I had been traveling for about 36 hours from Gibraltar to Malaga, Madrid, Miami, Santo Domingo. And when I got to Santo Domingo, I was totally, physically and emotionally devastated. And her family told me I wanted to stay in their home. And I said, no, I wanted to give them some space. And I got a taxi and to a hotel. And for some unknown reason, I told the taxi driver that I wanted to have a drink, but I don't mean an alcoholic drink. I was just thirsty. And I disclosed my anonymity to this taxi driver in the Dominican Republic. And he said, my name is Agustin. I'm from Alcoholics Anonymous. And what are the chances of that happening, in a country where I don't know anybody? And he became my spiritual mentor for the 10 or 12 days that I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, in the Dominican Republic. So, that's one of the many little stories that, the unseen hand of God shows itself. When I lost my business in 1997, I had absolutely no academic qualifications, absolutely no skills. And I was petrified at the time. And, because I didn't know what to do for work. It was the first time in my life I was without work. And through a series of, coincidences, I was encouraged to do a counselling course in addictions in Castle Craig in Scotland. Now remember, I don't even have a bloody English O level, but I, for some unknown reason, God chose a nobody to become somebody, and I finished my course in Castle Craig, and I worked as a therapist for 18 years. Yeah, so I always had this feeling. I always had this feeling of impending doom, and now that feeling of impending doom has greatly dissipated. I know that most of my fears are born out of my projecting. So anyway, well, what's happened? Yeah, I've said that there's been all these losses, but on the good side of what's happened is that I've been able to reconcile with my ex-wife. We're not romantically or sexually involved. The poor woman is very, very ill, but I have been able to make some sort of restitution to her, and we're great friends. Whenever I go to London, I stay with her. She's very fragile, and whenever she's wanted a break, she comes and stays with me. My eldest daughter, who wouldn't speak to me for the first 2 years of my recovery, as a parent, it used to cut me up something rotten because she used to tell me she hated me. That child is 41 years old, and she calls me every morning at 9:15 to see how I am and to tell me she loves me. And she calls me at 6 o'clock every evening on her way from work to tell me exactly the same thing. How are you? I love you. That is totally priceless for a child who wouldn't even get close to me, because I was a bloody monster. And the greatest compliment I've been, we speak in Alcoholics Anonymous about a profound personality change or a spiritual awakening. And the greatest compliment I've received is from my ex-wife, who says, I recognize you physically, but emotionally and mentally, you're not the same person. And we get along really, really well. This is a person who I tried to take her life because living with me had become unbearable. So, and for whatever reason, I'm not perhaps a great sponsor, but the higher power has put me at the right place at the right time to take the message of alcoholics. I'm a good 12-stepper, I think, and I also was placed in a privileged position to. I hope it doesn't come across as bragging. It's just to show you what the transition has been from a boy who couldn't put, when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't put two words together. I used to mumble under my breath because I didn't want you guys to laugh at me because I didn't know how to read. Well, that boy, was, became a counselor. I've been privileged to address a convention of 800 people. I've had 3 television programs on the subject of addiction. And this is from somebody who couldn't put 2 words together. So, I've also been in a privileged position of opening the first AA Spanish group in the south of Spain in 1991. There was nothing here, and I've just been very privileged. And, I'll always introduce myself as Harish. I'm a grateful alcoholic because, gratitude for me is not just a feeling. Gratitude for me is the 12th step in action. I think you're talking about it this morning. Freely ye have been given, freely give. And I think that's what the 12th step is about. In the daily, in the Just for Today card, it says, as you give to the world, so the world will give to you. Ultimately, what I do to others, I'm doing to myself. There was a disciple who went to a spiritual master and he says, how should I treat others? And he said, there are no others. We're all leaves of the one tree. We're all waves of the one ocean. Whatever I do to you, I'm ultimately doing to myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Harish. Thanks, Harish. You had me from the start, to be quite honest with you. I drank as a child. I used to have asthma attacks every Friday night. the cure for asthma attack is a hot whiskey. And every Friday night I'd have an asthma attack. And I always had that feeling of being less than. And I never drank like a gentleman. People talk about social drinking. My head goes into la la land because I don't know what they're talking about. I drank like a pig from day one, from the age of 12, and it caused so much guilt, shame, and remorse. I couldn't live with me, and I hated me. I absolutely hated me. I hated what I'd become. I just a scumbag. And I never want to go back there because of this program. I don't have to. I love being sober. I love having a smile on my face and transferring that smile to other people. And I love Mossy today. I look in the mirror. I don't know what you see, but I see something different. I'll tell you that. Alcoholics Anonymous has been good to me. Still with the same woman 40 years later. I just can't fake her off. All my kids talk to me. My grandkids think I'm nuts. I had two of them out there today and we had a bit of a laugh. We had a good laugh. And for me, that's what it's about. I'm so grateful to this fellowship for what it's done for me. And I'm so grateful for the Canarian International Group for what it's done for me as well. And I'm going to pass it over to the dinosaur, let him say what he has to say. Go on, Mick.
Thanks very much, Mossy. Harish, what a wonderful chair. You took me back I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and stopped drinking. And when I stopped drinking, I still acted the same. I didn't drink, but I acted the same. And I was very lucky because a man told me that I was suffering from a dis-ease of the mind. And I went back as a child and I could see then how my life was, insecure, hated everyone, nothing was good enough for me, And then I started to look at me and I began to change through this fellowship. And I loved what you said, a nobody becoming a somebody. That's exactly what Alcoholics Anonymous done for me. It made me into a person that I always have dreamt about being, by just practicing this program and what you people were showing me, because I needed to be showed, because I'm not very bright and people tell me to do things and I don't understand them. And being in this fellowship, I'm always learning from each and every one of the people that I come in contact with. And I'm very proud to say my name is Mick and I am an alcoholic. And by the grace of God in this fellowship, I don't need to take a drink because I wasn't like that. I am the makings of what you people have done. And I'm very proud of that. You say about family, and my family love me to bits. They think I'm stupid half the time because I act as a child, because I don't know how a 78-year-old person's supposed to act, and I just love being silly, I love it. And it's a thanks to you people. Okay, right. Now, over to you again, Mossy.
I'd just like to read this because it's my favorite reading, I think, of all the AA literature. And it's this. It's from, as Bill sees it, it's a full and thankful heart. One exercise that I practice is a full inventory of my blessings, and then for a right acceptance of the many gifts that are mine, both temporal and spiritual. When such a brand of gratitude is repeatedly affirmed and pondered, it can finally displace the natural tendency to congratulate myself on whatever progress I may have been enabled to make in some areas of living. And this is the part I love best. I try to hold fast to the truth that a full and thankful heart cannot entertain great conceits. When brimming with gratitude, one's heartbeat must surely result in outgoing love, the finest emotion that we can ever know.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thanks, Harish. And right, guys, I may as well thank Mick for you know something, Mick, you didn't screw it up this week. Well done.
You ain't finished yet.
Yeah, I suppose. Thanks, Mick, for doing this with me, and thanks to all the co-hosts they're always here in the background. Thanks everybody for sharing, and thank you, Harish. I think that's the best share you've ever done. So
Yeah.
we'll keep this one. And Carol is going to do the promises for us.
Thanks, Massey. My name's Carol, I'm an alcoholic. Promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises?
You think not?
We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thank you.
Where are we? Thank you, everyone, for the timekeeper, the co-hosts, and the person. Carol who done the promises, and Jeannie. Was it Jeannie? No. Jane for doing the preamble. Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want to use the breakout room after the meeting, please let the hosts know. And screen share the yellow card.
Who you see here, Mick?
What you hear?
When you leave here?
Let it stay here.
Good man, Mick. You didn't screw that up too badly. And Chap will be enabled this meeting closes when we close the meeting with the serenity prayer. And Harish, would you like to lead us out, my friend?
Using the word God as you understand them. God. Be the serenity.
Serenity to accept courage,
and the wisdom.
I will not. Thank you very much, Harry. Beautiful.
Thank you, Harish.
Thank you.
Thank you.